The auditorium buzzed with academic pretension as I watched my wife of 8 years hand me divorce papers during her PhD graduation reception. Dr. Alexis Rowan, she'd already changed her nameplate at work, smiled that practiced smile she'd perfected for faculty mixers while her friends giggled behind champagne flutes. "I thought we should make this official," she said, loud enough for her academic circle to hear. "Clean breaks are healthier, don't you think, Nathan?" I'm Nathan Caldwell, 38, former IT specialist turned freelance security consultant. For the past 4 years, I'd worked nights and weekends to pay for Alexis's research, her conferences, her designer suits that made her feel important. I'd become invisible in our social circle, the husband who fixed their computers and stayed quiet during dinner parties. "Congratulations on your achievement," I said, taking the papers. "Both of them." Her mentor, Dr. Patricia Hayes, raised an eyebrow. "Both?" "Her doctorate and her newfound honesty," I replied, scanning the documents. Everything was already filled out, notarized, ready for my signature. Though I suppose the timing could use work. Alexis's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Nathan has such a dry sense of humor. That's why this is better for both of us." I looked around the room at faces I'd known for years. These people had eaten at my table, accepted my help with their technology problems, borrowed my tools. Now they watched me like I was an interesting specimen in one of Alexis's research projects. Ben Travers, her research assistant, stood near the refreshment table, trying to look casual. 41 years old, driving a leased Tesla, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He'd been to our house dozens of times, always finding reasons to work late with Alexis, always complimenting her insights while barely acknowledging my existence. "Well," I said, folding the papers and slipping them into my jacket pocket. "This has been enlightening." "You're not going to sign them now?" Alexis asked, her composure cracking slightly. "I need to read the fine print. You understand. Trust, but verify." Her friend Jennifer Morrison, another professor, whispered something that made the group chuckle. I caught the word passive and smiled. "Enjoy your celebration," I said, heading for the exit. "I'll be in touch." The spring air outside felt cleaner somehow. I walked to my car, a practical Honda that Alexis had always complained about, and sat in the driver's seat for a moment. Through the auditorium windows, I could see her animated conversation with her circle, probably explaining away my reaction. That evening, I spread the divorce papers across my kitchen table and read every word. Standard no-fault dissolution, 50-50 asset split, no alimony requested. Alexis had been thorough. She'd even included a detailed inventory of our possessions. What caught my attention was what wasn't listed. The joint savings account I'd been contributing to for years, now mysteriously absent from the paperwork. I opened my laptop and checked our banking. The account showed a balance of $47. 2 days ago, it had contained $38,000, money I'd saved from security consulting jobs while she pursued her academic dreams. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the papers. About time she upgraded. A friend. I poured myself a drink and walked to my home office. The walls were lined with computer equipment, security monitors, and certification plaques from my consulting work. Most people saw IT support when they looked at me. They missed the part about security consulting, the background checks, the surveillance systems, the digital forensics training. I opened a new file on my computer and titled it Project Transparency. The next morning, Alexis came home to collect some belongings. She moved through our house like she was touring a museum, pointing out items she wanted to take. "The coffee machine was a gift from my parents," she said, unplugging the expensive espresso maker I'd bought for her birthday. "Of course," I replied from the couch, watching her work. "Nathan, about the savings account." "What about it?" She paused, a crystal vase in her hands. "I needed to secure some funds for my transition period. Starting a new life requires resources." "I'm sure it does." "You're being very understanding about this," she said, studying my face. I'm full of surprises. She loaded her car with boxes while I watched from the window. Ben arrived in his Tesla to help, wearing weekend casual that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. They worked efficiently, like they'd planned this choreography. After they left, I walked through the house, noting what remained. The furniture we'd bought together, the books, the kitchen supplies, everything that made a house feel like a home. I opened my laptop and began typing. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside Bar, a neighborhood establishment where I occasionally met clients. The owner, Tommy Rodriguez, had been a friend since college, one of the few people who knew both versions of me. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Tommy said, sliding a beer across the bar. "Close. Someone ran over my marriage." "Alexis?" I nodded. 8 years, Tommy. 8 years of supporting her career, her dreams, her academic aspirations. You know what she said when she handed me the divorce papers? "Clean breaks are healthier." "What are you going to do?" I took a long drink. "I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. A clean break. That doesn't sound ominous at all. I'm not the villain here, Tommy. I'm just tired of being invisible." Over the next week, I began my research. Security consulting had taught me that information was the most valuable currency in any conflict. I started with public records, property transfers, business licenses, court documents. Then I moved to social media, cross-referencing posts and photos, building timelines. Alexis had been careful, but not careful enough. The hotel receipts in Ben's name, the conference registrations that didn't match actual conference dates, the restaurant charges during times she'd claimed to be working late at the lab. I also discovered something interesting about Ben Travers. His LinkedIn profile claimed an MBA from Northwestern, but the university had no record of his graduation. His research publications were sparse, mostly co-authored with other people's work. He was, in professional terms, a fraud. But the most interesting discovery came from a deeper dive into Alexis's academic circle. Her friend Jennifer Morrison had been posting subtle complaints about department politics, specifically mentioning favoritism in research assistant assignments and questions about grant fund allocation. I printed everything and organized it into folders, physical copies, digital backups, cloud storage in 3 different locations. If there's one thing security work teaches you, it's redundancy. My phone rang. "Alexis." "Nathan, we need to talk." "About what?" "About moving forward. I'd like to finalize the divorce proceedings quickly." "I'm still reviewing the paperwork. There's nothing complicated about it. Standard dissolution, equal split of assets." "Except for the savings account." Silence on the other end. Then, "I told you, I needed those funds for transition expenses. $38,000 seems like a generous transition budget. I'll pay you back once I'm settled." "I'm sure you will. In the meantime, I'm having my attorney review everything." "You hired an attorney?" "I'm full of surprises, remember?" After hanging up, I continued my research. Ben's Tesla was leased through his university position, which meant it could be repossessed if his employment status changed. His apartment was month to month, probably because his credit couldn't handle a long-term lease. Alexis's new position at the university was still probationary, subject to review after her first year. Any questions about her professional conduct could jeopardize her tenure track. I opened a new document and began writing. The first letter would go to the university's Grant Oversight Committee, raising questions about fund allocation in Alexis's research department. The second would go to the Academic Integrity Board, questioning Ben's credentials. The third would go to the leasing company handling Ben's Tesla, providing information about his fraudulent employment claims. All anonymous, all documented with publicly available information, all completely legal. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "She thinks you're going to roll over like always. Show her different." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. The next morning, I mailed the letters. 3 days after mailing my letters, I received a call from Alexis. Her voice carried a tension I hadn't heard since her dissertation defense. "Nathan, something strange is happening at work." "Oh?" "Someone filed a complaint with the Grant Oversight Committee. They're questioning my research fund allocation." "That sounds serious." "It's ridiculous. Everything I've done is completely above board, but they're requiring a full audit of my accounts." I made appropriate sympathetic noises while opening my laptop to check the university's public records portal. The complaint had been logged, assigned a case number, and scheduled for preliminary review. "I'm sure it will work out," I said. Truth has a way of surfacing. "There's something else. Ben's having problems too. The university is questioning his credentials, and his car got repossessed yesterday." "Unfortunate timing." "Nathan, I know we're going through a difficult period, but I need to ask, did you have anything to do with this?" "With what?" "Your work problems? These complaints, the timing, it seems suspicious." "Alexis, I'm a computer consultant. I fix printers and install security cameras. What would I know about academic politics?" After she hung up, I drove to my office, a small space I rented in a converted warehouse downtown. The neighborhood was transitioning from industrial to trendy, with coffee shops opening next to auto repair businesses. I had 3 surveillance jobs running: a suspicious spouse case, a corporate theft investigation, and background checks for a law firm. Routine work that paid well and kept my skills sharp. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Nathan Caldwell?" "Speaking." "This is Detective Lisa Park, Metro Police. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your wife." My stomach tightened. "Ex-wife. What kind of questions?" "She filed a harassment complaint. Claims you've been following her, making threatening phone calls. I haven't spoken to her except when she calls me. And I haven't left my office in 2 days. Can anyone verify that?" I looked at my security camera system, which recorded everything in and around my office. "Yes, actually. I have complete video documentation of my activities." "Would you be willing to come in and discuss this?" "Of course. When?" "This afternoon, if possible." After scheduling the appointment, I reviewed my security footage from the past week. Every moment was documented: my arrival times, phone calls, client meetings. I burned copies to DVD and prepared a detailed timeline. The police station smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Detective Park was younger than I'd expected, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Your wife, ex-wife, claims you've been calling her at all hours making vague threats." I handed her my phone records. "These show every call I've made in the past month. You'll notice I haven't called her once. She's called me 4 times. Detective Park reviewed the documents. "She also claims you've been following her." I provided the security footage. "This shows my location for the past 2 weeks. I've been at my office or at home. I can provide GPS data from my phone if needed." "You seem very prepared for this conversation." "I work in security consulting. Documentation is part of the job." She studied my face. "What's your take on why she'd make these accusations?" "Divorce makes people paranoid. She's probably feeling guilty about emptying our joint savings account and projecting that onto me." "She took money from joint accounts?" $38,000, the day before she served me divorce papers. Detective Park made notes. "Have you filed any complaints against her?" "No. I figure the courts will sort out the financial issues." After an hour of questions, she seemed satisfied that I wasn't harassing Alexis. But her final comment stuck with me. "Mr. Caldwell, divorce can bring out the worst in people. If you're planning any kind of retaliation, I'd advise against it. These situations can escalate quickly." "I'm not the retaliating type, Detective." "Good, because I'll be keeping an eye on this situation." That evening, I received another text from the unknown number. "Police visit didn't go as planned for her. She's getting desperate." This time, I decided to trace the number. My security software included digital forensics tools, and tracking phone numbers was basic investigative work. The number belonged to a burner phone, purchased with cash at a convenience store downtown. But the phone's location data showed it had been in several places I recognized: the university, Alexis's apartment building, the coffee shop where she met her friends. Someone in her circle was feeding me information. I made a list of possibilities. Jennifer Morrison, who'd been complaining about department politics. Patricia Hayes, her mentor, who might know about financial irregularities. One of the graduate students who worked with Ben. Or it could be Ben himself, trying to manipulate the situation for his own benefit. My phone rang. Alexis again. The police said you have an alibi for everything. Because I haven't done anything wrong. Someone is targeting me, Nathan. My research funding is being questioned. Ben lost his job today, and now there are rumors about my professional conduct. What kind of rumors? People are saying I've been misusing grant money, that I got Ben his position through favoritism, that my research data might be fabricated. Are any of those things true? Silence. Then, of course not. Then you have nothing to worry about. I think someone is trying to destroy my career. Who would do that? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. After she hung up, I sat in my office thinking. The anonymous tips were accelerating the timeline, but they were also making Alexis suspicious. If she started investigating seriously, she might discover my involvement. I needed to be more careful. The next morning, I drove to the university campus. It had been months since I'd visited Alexis's workplace, and I was curious to see how the investigation was affecting her department. I parked near the science building and walked through the campus. Students hurried between classes, backpacks slung over shoulders, absorbed in their phones. Faculty members moved more deliberately, carrying coffee and looking perpetually thoughtful. I found a coffee shop across from Alexis's building and settled in with a laptop. From my table, I could see the entrance to her department. At 11:30, Alexis emerged with Jennifer Morrison. They walked quickly, heads together in intense conversation. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language suggested stress and frustration. Ben was nowhere to be seen. I ordered another coffee and continued watching. Over the next 2 hours, I observed the rhythm of the department, who came and went, who talked to whom, who seemed to be avoiding others. At 1:40, a woman I didn't recognize entered the building carrying a briefcase and wearing a serious expression. 20 minutes later, she emerged with Alexis and 2 men in suits. I recognized the signs of an official investigation. My phone buzzed with a text. Audit team just left. Found irregularities in 3 accounts. She's in trouble. I closed my laptop and drove home. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. Not the burner phone. This was different. Mr. Caldwell? This is Margaret Chen from the university's legal department. I understand you're Dr. Rowan's ex-husband? We're separated, yes. I need to ask you some questions about joint financial accounts and research funding. Would you be available to meet tomorrow? What kind of questions? There are some irregularities in Dr. Rowan's research accounts, and we're trying to trace the source of certain deposits. My heart rate increased. I don't know anything about her work accounts. But you might know about personal accounts that receive transfers from university funds. I thought about the $38,000 Alexis had taken from our savings. If she'd been mixing personal and professional money, that could constitute fraud. I'd be happy to help, I said. But I think I should bring an attorney. That's your right, of course. After scheduling the meeting, I called my lawyer, David Kim, who'd handled my business contracts for years. Nathan, this sounds like a criminal investigation. Are you sure you want to get involved? If Alexis was stealing university money and putting it in our joint account, I need to protect myself. Good point. I'll meet you there. That night, I couldn't sleep. The investigation was moving faster than I'd anticipated, and in directions I hadn't expected. My anonymous tips had been designed to create professional problems for Alexis and Ben, not criminal liability. But if they'd actually been committing fraud, that wasn't my fault. My phone buzzed with another message. Tomorrow's meeting will be interesting. She doesn't know what's coming. I stared at the text for a long moment, then typed back, "Who is this?" No response. I spent the rest of the night wondering who was pulling strings behind the scenes and whether I was the puppet master or just another puppet. The university's legal office occupied the top floor of the administration building, with windows overlooking the quad where students gathered between classes. Margaret Chen was younger than her voice had suggested, with precise movements and the kind of attention to detail that made me nervous. "Mr. Caldwell, thank you for coming. This is Detective Park, I believe you've met, and Special Agent Rodriguez from the FBI's white-collar crime unit." My lawyer, David Kim, raised an eyebrow. "FBI? I thought this was a university audit." "It started as an audit," Agent Rodriguez said, "but we've discovered evidence of federal grant fraud, which makes it our jurisdiction." Margaret Chen opened a thick folder. "Mr. Caldwell, are you familiar with your wife's research funding sources?" "Ex-wife, and no, not really. She mentioned grants and university money, but I don't know the details." Over the past 2 years, Dr. Rowan received approximately $200,000 in federal research grants. The money was supposed to fund equipment purchases, research materials, and graduate student stipends. Agent Rodriguez continued. Instead, significant portions were diverted to personal accounts, including a joint savings account in your name. Oh, why? Felt the room temperature drop. How much money? $38,000, transferred in small amounts over 18 months, then withdrawn in a lump sum 3 weeks ago. David leaned forward. My client had no knowledge of the source of those funds. He believed they came from his wife's legitimate university salary. That may be true, Margaret Chen said, but we need to verify his involvement or lack thereof. For the next 2 hours, they walked me through bank records, transaction dates, and transfer patterns. The picture that emerged was damning. Alexis had been systematically stealing federal grant money and hiding it in our joint account. The $38,000 she'd taken during our separation was stolen government funds. "What happens now?" I asked. "We're building a case against Dr. Rowan and potentially others in her department," Agent Rodriguez said. "Your cooperation could be valuable." "What kind of cooperation?" "Help us understand the personal side of the financial transactions. When did you notice unusual deposits? Did your wife explain where the money came from? Did she ask you to participate in any financial activities?" I answered their questions honestly. The large deposits had started about 2 years ago, around the time Alexis received her first major grant. She'd explained them as bonuses and consulting fees. I'd been too focused on my own work to question the details. "There's something else," Margaret Chen said. "We believe Dr. Rowan had help. Someone with access to university financial systems helped her manipulate the records. Ben Travers? Among others, possibly." After the meeting, David and I walked across campus in silence. Finally, he spoke. "Nathan, you're in a complicated position. Legally, you're probably safe. There's no evidence you knew about the fraud. But this is going to get messy." "How messy?" "Federal fraud charges carry serious prison time. If Alexis gets desperate, she might try to implicate you as a co-conspirator." That evening, I sat in my office reviewing everything I knew. The anonymous tips that had started the investigation were accelerating a case that would have developed anyway. Alexis and Ben had been committing actual crimes, not just ethical violations. My phone rang. Alexis, sounding panicked. "Nathan, I need to see you. Tonight." "Why?" "Please, just meet me at Riverside Bar in an hour." I arrived early and chose a table in the back corner where I could see the entrance. Tommy Rodriguez was working behind the bar, and I caught his eye. He nodded. We'd arranged a signal system years ago for situations that might require backup. Alexis arrived 20 minutes late, looking haggard. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and her clothes looked slept in. "They think I stole money," she said without preamble. "Did you?" "It's complicated. It's actually pretty simple. Either you took grant money for personal use or you didn't." She ordered a drink with shaking hands. The university system is so bureaucratic. Sometimes you have to be creative with funding to get things done. Creative how? Moving money between accounts, using personal funds temporarily when official transfers are delayed, that sort of thing. Alexis, they know about our savings account. They know you deposited federal grant money there. Her face went pale. How could they know that? Because they're federal investigators, and financial records aren't private when crimes are involved. I never meant for it to go this far. Ben said it was temporary, just until the next grant cycle. Ben told you to steal federal money? He said everyone did it, that it was normal academic practice. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. What exactly did Ben tell you to do? He handled most of the financial details. I just signed the paperwork he prepared. So Ben was managing your grant accounts? He was helping me navigate the university bureaucracy. I trusted him. The pieces clicked into place. Ben hadn't just been having an affair with my wife. He'd been using her to commit fraud. She'd been too infatuated to question his methods, and now they were both facing federal charges. Alexis, you need a criminal defense attorney, tonight. I can't afford an attorney. All my money is tied up in the investigation. What about Ben? Can't he help? Ben disappeared 2 days ago. He's not answering his phone, his apartment is empty, and the university has no forwarding address. I felt a cold realization settle in my stomach. He ran. It looks that way. Leaving you to face the charges alone. She started crying then, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Nathan, I'm so sorry. About everything. The divorce, the money, the way I treated you. I made terrible mistakes. I watched her cry and felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger, no satisfaction. Just emptiness where 8 years of marriage used to be. What do you want from me, Alexis? Help me, please. You understand financial systems. You know how to investigate things. Help me prove that Ben was the one running the scheme. Why would I do that? Because despite everything, we were married for 8 years. That has to count for something. I finished my drink and stood up. 8 years does count for something. It counts for me knowing exactly who you are. Nathan, please. Good luck with the investigation, Alexis. I hope you find a good lawyer. I walked out of the bar and drove home, my mind racing. Ben's disappearance changed everything. With him gone, Alexis would face the full weight of the federal case alone. The evidence would show her signature on fraudulent documents, her accounts receiving stolen money, her lifestyle funded by federal grants. She was going to prison. My phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number. Ben's in Mexico. Flew out of Houston yesterday. She's alone now. I stared at the message, then typed, "How do you know this?" The response came immediately. Because I helped him disappear, and now I'm going to help you finish what we started. I pulled over and called the number. It went straight to voicemail, a generic automated message with no personal identification. But as I sat in my car, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. The anonymous tips, the inside information, the knowledge of Ben's movements. Someone with access to university systems had been orchestrating this entire situation. Someone who wanted both Alexis and Ben destroyed. Someone who knew about my marriage problems and saw an opportunity to use me as cover for their own agenda. I drove home with a growing sense that I wasn't the only one seeking revenge. The question was, who else wanted Alexis to fall, and what did they want from me? I spent the next morning researching everyone in Alexis's department, looking for connections I'd missed. The anonymous helper had access to university financial systems, knew about Ben's travel plans, and understood enough about federal investigations to predict their timeline. That narrowed the field considerably. I started with Jennifer Morrison, Alexis's friend who'd been complaining about department politics. Her background was clean, tenure-track professor, solid research record, no obvious grudges against Alexis. Patricia Hayes, the department mentor, was more interesting. She'd been passed over for department chair when a younger candidate got the position. She'd also been Ben's supervisor before he transferred to work with Alexis. But the most intriguing possibility was someone I'd barely considered: Lisa Park, the graduate student who managed the department's financial systems. I'd met Lisa twice at faculty parties, quiet, efficient, the kind of person who handled administrative details while professors took credit for results. She had access to all university accounts, understood federal grant requirements, and would know how to manipulate records without leaving obvious traces. More importantly, she'd been working in the department for 4 years, long enough to watch Ben charm his way into positions he didn't deserve, long enough to see Alexis receive grants and opportunities based on connections rather than merit. I drove to campus and found Lisa in the department office, working at a computer terminal surrounded by stacks of financial documents. "Excuse me, Lisa. I'm Nathan Caldwell, Alexis's husband." "Ex-husband," she corrected without looking up. "I heard about the separation. I was wondering if I could ask you some questions about the department's financial systems." Now she looked at me, her expression carefully neutral. "What kind of questions?" "The FBI is investigating grant fraud. They think Alexis was involved, but I suspect someone else was manipulating the accounts." "Why would you think that?" "Because I know my wife. She's ambitious and self-centered, but she's not clever enough to run a sophisticated fraud scheme." Lisa saved her work and closed the computer screen. "Let's talk outside." We walked to a coffee shop off campus, where she ordered black coffee and chose a table away from other customers. "You're right," she said. "Alexis didn't plan the fraud scheme. Ben did." "Ben was part of it, but he wasn't the mastermind either." I waited for her to continue. 3 years ago, the department hired Ben as a research assistant despite his questionable credentials. Patricia Hayes pushed for his appointment, overriding concerns from other faculty members. Why? Because Ben had something on her. Photos from a conference, evidence of her own financial irregularities, something that gave him leverage. So Ben was blackmailing Patricia and using her position to access grant accounts. He'd identify professors with large funding awards and find ways to skim money from their budgets. How many professors? At least 6 over the past 2 years. Small amounts from each account spread over time to avoid detection. I felt pieces clicking into place. But Alexis was different. Alexis was personal. Ben seduced her, convinced her to trust him with her financial management, then used her accounts for the largest thefts. "And you know all this because?" Lisa smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "Because I've been documenting everything. Every transaction, every forged signature, every manipulated record. Why? Because I'm tired of watching incompetent people succeed while qualified people get ignored. Ben was a fraud who charmed his way into positions he didn't earn. Alexis was a mediocre researcher who got opportunities because of her connections and appearance. So you decided to destroy them both." "I decided to expose the truth. The fact that it destroys them is just a side effect." We sat in silence while I processed this information. Lisa had been the anonymous source, the puppet master pulling strings behind the scenes. She'd used my marriage problems as cover for her own agenda. "What about Patricia Hayes?" "She'll face her own investigation once the Ben situation is resolved. I have evidence of her financial irregularities going back 5 years. And the other professors Ben was stealing from? They'll be cleared once the investigation shows they were victims, not co-conspirators." I studied Lisa's face, looking for signs of emotion. She seemed calm, satisfied, like someone who'd completed a difficult project. "Why did you contact me?" "Because you had legitimate grievances against Alexis, and your involvement would make the investigation look like a personal vendetta rather than a systematic exposure of corruption." "You used me." "We used each other. You wanted revenge against your cheating wife? I wanted justice for academic fraud. Our goals aligned." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meeting going well? She's explaining everything, isn't she?" I showed Lisa the message. "Is this you?" She shook her head. That's not my number. A chill ran down my spine. If Lisa wasn't sending the anonymous tips, then someone else was monitoring our activities. Someone who knew about our meeting, our conversation, our entire investigation. Lisa, we need to leave. Now. Why? Because someone else has been watching us, and I don't think they want witnesses to survive this conversation. We left the coffee shop quickly, walking in different directions. I drove home with my mind racing, trying to understand who else might be involved in the conspiracy. At home, I checked my security system and found something that made my stomach drop. Someone had been in my office while I was at campus. Nothing was missing, but files had been moved, computer screens had been touched, and my backup drives had been accessed. Someone had copied everything, all my research on Alexis, all my documentation of the investigation, all my evidence of Lisa's involvement. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Nathan. The voice was electronically disguised, but I could tell it was male. Who is this? Someone who's been watching your excellent work. You've been very thorough in documenting the university fraud case. What do you want? I want to make you an offer. Walk away from this investigation now, forget everything you've learned, and I'll make sure the federal case against Alexis proceeds smoothly. And if I don't? Then I'll provide evidence to the FBI that you were Ben's partner in the fraud scheme. Your security consulting business gave you the technical skills to manipulate university financial systems, and your marriage problems gave you motivation to steal money. I felt the walls closing in. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your email. I opened my laptop and found a message with video attachments. The first showed me entering the university administration building on multiple occasions over the past month. The second showed me meeting with Lisa Park. The third showed me accessing university computer systems during my visits to Alexis's office. All of it could be interpreted as evidence of my involvement in the fraud scheme. The federal investigators will find this evidence very compelling, the voice continued, especially combined with the $38,000 that passed through your joint account. What do you really want? I want Lisa Park to disappear before she can testify against certain people, and I want you to help make that happen. The line went silent, leaving me staring at fabricated evidence of crimes I'd never committed, wondering how many other people were playing games I didn't understand. I had 12 hours to decide whether to help eliminate Lisa Park or face federal fraud charges myself. The anonymous caller had made the stakes clear: participate in covering up the university conspiracy or become its next victim. I spent the evening reviewing my options. Running wasn't practical. Federal investigators could track me anywhere. Fighting the fabricated evidence would be expensive and uncertain. And doing nothing would result in Lisa's disappearance and my eventual prosecution. But there was a fourth option: expose everyone involved and let the consequences fall where they belonged. I called Lisa Park's number. No answer. I drove to her apartment and found it empty, with signs of a hasty departure. Either she'd figured out the danger and fled, or someone had already gotten to her. My phone buzzed with a text. She's safe for now, but that can change quickly. Have you made your decision? I typed back. I need more time. You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, the FBI receives evidence of your involvement. I drove to Riverside Bar, where Tommy Rodriguez was closing up for the night. You look terrible, he said, pouring me a drink. I need to ask you a favor, a big one. What kind of favor? I explained the situation, the fraud investigation, the anonymous threats, the evidence that could destroy me. Tommy listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. So someone is trying to frame you for crimes you didn't commit in order to cover up crimes they did commit. That's the summary, yes. And you think the best solution is to expose everyone involved? I think it's the only solution that doesn't involve me going to prison or becoming an accessory to whatever happened to Lisa Park. Tommy finished cleaning glasses and locked the register. What do you need from me? Help setting up a meeting, somewhere public, with witnesses, where I can force everyone into the open. That sounds dangerous. Everything is dangerous now. But at least this way, I control the timing. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Tommy would contact the FBI agents and arrange a meeting at the bar tomorrow evening, ostensibly for me to provide additional information about Alexis's fraud case. I would invite the anonymous caller to attend, claiming I was ready to cooperate. The goal was to get everyone in the same room and force the truth into the open. The next morning, I received a call from Agent Rodriguez. "Mr. Caldwell, we'd like to meet with you again. There have been new developments in the case." "What kind of developments?" "We'll discuss that when we meet. Can you come to our office this afternoon?" "Actually, I was hoping we could meet somewhere more informal. I have information that might be sensitive, and I'd prefer a neutral location." We arranged to meet at Riverside Bar at 6 p.m. I spent the day preparing, copying files to multiple locations and writing detailed summaries of everything I'd discovered. At 5:30, I arrived at the bar early. Tommy had arranged the space carefully. Recording equipment hidden behind the bar, clear sightlines to all entrances, and backup plans if the situation turned dangerous. Agent Rodriguez and Detective Park arrived promptly at 6, followed by Margaret Chen from the university. They chose a table near the center of the room, professional but relaxed. "Mr. Caldwell, we appreciate you meeting with us," Agent Rodriguez said. "We have some questions about new evidence that's come to light." "What kind of evidence?" Detective Park opened a folder. "Video footage showing you entering university buildings multiple times over the past month, accessing computer systems, and meeting with department personnel." My heart rate increased, but I tried to stay calm. "I visited my wife's workplace a few times during our separation. That's not unusual." "What about your meetings with Lisa Park?" "Lisa provided information about the department's financial systems. I thought it might help your investigation." "Where is Lisa Park now?" Margaret Chen asked. "I don't know. She wasn't at her office yesterday, and she's not answering her phone." Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. "Mr. Caldwell, we have reason to believe you've been more involved in this fraud scheme than you initially indicated." "That's not true." "Then explain why someone has been feeding you inside information about our investigation." Before I could answer, the bar's front door opened and Patricia Hayes walked in, looking nervous and overdressed for the casual setting. "Professor Hayes," Margaret Chen said, standing up. "What are you doing here?" I received a call saying Nathan Caldwell wanted to meet with me about the investigation. I hadn't called Patricia Hayes. Someone else was orchestrating this gathering. The door opened again, and Alexis entered, followed by a man I didn't recognize. Tall, expensive suit, the kind of presence that suggested money and power. "This is interesting," the stranger said, surveying the room. "Everyone I wanted to see, all in one place." Agent Rodriguez reached for his badge. "Sir, this is a federal investigation. I'm going to need you to identify yourself." "Special Agent Michael Torres, FBI Internal Affairs." He showed his credentials. "I'm investigating corruption in this case." The room went silent. Internal Affairs meant someone in the investigation was dirty. "Agent Rodriguez," Torres continued, "you've been receiving information from an unauthorized source and using it to manipulate the direction of this investigation." Rodriguez's face went pale. "That's not true. We have recordings of your phone calls with Patricia Hayes, in which she provided confidential information about university personnel in exchange for immunity from prosecution." Patricia Hayes started to stand up, but Torres gestured for her to remain seated. "Professor Hayes, you've been using Agent Rodriguez to target specific individuals while protecting yourself and your co-conspirators." "I was trying to help the investigation," Patricia said. "You were trying to eliminate witnesses who could testify about your own financial crimes." The pieces fell into place. Patricia Hayes had been the anonymous caller, using her relationship with Agent Rodriguez to manipulate the investigation. She'd wanted Lisa Park eliminated because Lisa had evidence of Patricia's involvement in the fraud scheme. "What about Ben Travers?" I asked. Torres smiled grimly. "Ben Travers is in federal custody in Houston. He was arrested trying to board a plane to Mexico. He's been cooperating with our investigation for the past week. Alexis looked confused. But I thought Ben had escaped. That's what Professor Hayes wanted you to think. She arranged for false information to be leaked, making everyone believe Ben had fled the country. Why? Because Ben was prepared to testify that Professor Hayes was the mastermind behind the fraud scheme. She needed him to disappear before he could implicate her. Agent Rodriguez looked sick. Patricia, you told me Ben was the primary target. I told you what you needed to hear to do your job effectively. Torres opened his briefcase and removed several folders. Professor Hayes, you're under arrest for federal fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Agent Rodriguez, you're suspended pending a full internal investigation. As Torres read Patricia her rights, I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The conspiracy had been larger and more complex than I'd imagined, but the truth was finally emerging. What about me? Alexis asked quietly. Torres looked at her with something resembling sympathy. You'll face charges related to the misuse of grant funds, but your cooperation and Ben's testimony suggest you were manipulated rather than a willing participant. Your lawyer can work out a plea agreement. And Nathan? Detective Park asked. Mr. Caldwell was never a suspect in our investigation. The evidence suggesting his involvement was fabricated by Professor Hayes to discredit his potential testimony. As the federal agents led Patricia Hayes away in handcuffs, Alexis approached me. Nathan, I'm sorry about everything. I looked at her, my wife of 8 years, the woman I'd loved and supported and ultimately lost to ambition and poor judgment. I know you are, Alexis, but sorry doesn't fix what's broken. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked out of the bar. Tommy emerged from behind the counter where he'd been recording everything. Well, he said, that was more excitement than we usually get on a Tuesday night. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. The investigation was over, the conspiracy was exposed, and I was free to rebuild my life without the weight of lies and deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa Park. Saw the news. Thank you for not giving up. I'm safe, and I'll be testifying next week. I typed back, justice served. Outside the bar, the city lights reflected off wet pavement, and I walked home through streets that felt familiar again. The neighborhood was still transitioning, still caught between what it had been and what it was becoming. But change, I realized, wasn't always something that happened to you. Sometimes it was something you chose, something you fought for, something you earned through persistence and courage and refusing to accept lies as truth. I had my life back. Now, I had to figure out what to do with it. The story ended there, in the space between what was lost and what might be possible, with truth finally louder than silence.